The Bears are here to stay. This, to me, tells me that they're all in on Caleb Williams.
Could you envision a better scenario for a young quarterback?
The Chicago Bears are poised for a playoff run in 2024, stepping out of NFL purgatory and into the NFC spotlight. But before you dismiss this notion, let's delve into why this resurgence is so imminent. It's far too easy to hate on a team that hasn't won a playoff game since 2010, and prior to the arrival of Ryan Poles as the team's general manager, the Bears looked hopeless. This team has lacked direction for decades, desperately needing a franchise quarterback to take them forward. The lack of clear roster building resulted in endless seasons of misery with just one winning season in the last decade. Chicago fans have forgotten what it feels like to intimidate their opponents and be considered among the NFC's elite. But right now, following a miraculous 2024 offseason, the Bears are now poised to rival their competitors in a way they haven't been able to since Rex Grossman led the team to a Super Bowl in 2006. This revamped roster now boasts Pro Bowlers, All-Pros, free agency sensations, and a generational rookie quarterback. But how did this all happen? How did we end up here talking about the Bears as dangerous team once again?
My job is to build a roster that's going to sustain success for a long period of time.
After a 6-11 record in the 2021 season, Chicago cleared house, firing general manager Ryan Pace and head coach Matt Nagy following a miserable spell with the franchise. The Justin Fields era was off to a poor start, and somehow the team they had fielded lacked any serious threat to its opposition. The wide receiver room was led by an emerging Darnell Mooney, but the Allen Robinson hostage situation fell flat on its face. Fields was inadequately protected by a patchwork offensive line and a defense including blue-chip Khalil Mack, Pro Bowler Robert Quinn, and an experienced secondary all went to waste. Chicago decided it was time for a change, and because of that, hired Kansas City Chiefs Executive Director of Player Personnel to be their new general manager. Ryan Poles had taken a job with the Chiefs as a scouting assistant in 2009 before moving into a role as a college scouting coordinator in 2010. When Andy Reid and his staff took over Kansas City in 2013, Poles retained his position despite the franchise and staff overhaul. Not only did he remain with the program, but he also steadily advanced, eventually landing the role of Director of College Scouting in 2016. He's been a hands-on scout his entire career in the league so far, and when the job opened up in Chicago, he got his first shot at running an NFL franchise. For a young man to grow as quickly as Poles did in the league proves his qualities as a professional. He worked closely with Ken Dorsey originally before learning from Brett Veach when he took over in 2017. Veach is statistically the Chiefs' most successful general manager in the franchise's history and is of course the scout responsible for the Patrick Mahomes selection in 2017. He wasn't the general manager just yet, but Veach was the guy vouching for Mahomes and the one that convinced both Dorsey and Reid that he was the right selection. And Poles has certainly put in the work and learned from some of the best in the game, but just 2 years into his tenure in Chicago, and this roster is unrecognizable. He went right to work in Chicago too, opting to trade Khalil Mack and his contract to the LA Chargers in exchange for a second-round pick in 2022 and a sixth-rounder in 2023. Mack was an impact player, of course, but Poles got this one right. While Khalil Mack is a talented athlete and dominated with 18 sacks in a bounce-back season in 2023, the Chargers are no closer to winning a Super Bowl than Chicago, and they too considered trading Mack during the 2024 offseason. And Poles was active in the 2022 NFL Draft, in his first draft, trading around several times in the late rounds. The Mack trade meant he secured another second-round pick to use, which made a lot of sense considering the absence of a first-rounder that year. In that draft, Poles added corner Kyler Gordon and safety Jaquan Brisker, both in the second round, as well as finding an overlooked future star in offensive tackle Braxton Jones, who 2 years later is one of the most respected members of the Bears' offensive line. His mission was clear: add youth in the secondary and bolster the trenches. It was far from a glamorous draft, but a very necessary step in what was about to be one of the league's toughest rebuilds. But before you can rebuild a roster, you've got to rip down the old one first. Khalil Mack was just one of the first several talented names headed out of the building. With the 2022 season underway, Poles traded veteran edge rusher Robert Quinn to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for a fourth-round pick. And less than 2 weeks later, he dealt the heartbeat of the defense and Roquan Smith to the Baltimore Ravens, bringing in a second and fifth-round pick in the exchange. He was clearly avoiding the Bears to a big deal that they couldn't afford. Roquan Smith wanted a new deal, which he secured in Baltimore. The Bears, facing a significant rebuilding phase, recognized that Smith's contract wouldn't propel them to the top. Consequently, Smith was traded and Poles persisted with the rebuild. Now, while the work Ryan Poles has done in Chicago has been largely terrific, he hasn't been perfect. He's attempted to fix the issue at wide receiver on multiple occasions. First, he traded for Patriots former first-rounder N'Keal Harry, although only giving up a 7th-round selection to get him. but it was the second wide receiver trade that grounded him. Sending a second-round pick to Pittsburgh for out-of-favor diva Chase Claypool was, and likely will always be, the worst piece of his business Ryan Poles has put together in Chicago. Claypool was dreadful on arrival and lasted less than a full season before he was moved on to the Miami Dolphins. The missleep, however, served as an early lesson for Poles. Of course, the moment of brilliance that really put Ryan Poles on the map was the trade with Carolina. Chicago's 3-14 season landed them the #1 pick in the draft, and a decision to make on the future of the franchise at quarterback. Clearly unimpressed by Bryce Young, and perhaps wrongly unenthused by CJ Stroud too, Poles decided the better route for the franchise long-term was to trade out of the 1 spot in exchange for an offer he just couldn't refuse. He traded the #1 pick on March 15th, 6 weeks before the draft, with Carolina sending their first round and second rounders in 2023, first rounder in 2024, second rounder in 2025, and star wide receiver DJ Moore. Ryan Poles had brought Chicago a much needed weapon offensively, as well as securing the future of the Carolina Panthers draft picks, setting the team up for future success by building through the draft. Only nobody quite knew how well that trade was going to work for the Bears, who somehow find themselves on the clock at #1 once again the following season. Having eventually drafted offensive tackle Darnell Wright in the first round in 2023, it was time for Poles, Eberflus, and the franchise to see what they could do with a quarterback of their own. Justin Fields was traded to Pittsburgh in the buildup, and Chicago focused in on who might be next. And as luck would have it, at least for Chicago, the Panthers' first season with Bryce Young under center went about as poorly as you can imagine. They won 2 games that year and would have the #1 overall pick on the draft once again, had they not traded it to Chicago. So the Bears focused in on Caleb Williams as the future of the franchise, and after spending the first 2 years in charge ripping the roster apart and laying the foundations, it was finally time for Ryan Poles to truly go to work. He acquired veteran wide receiver and 6-time Pro Bowler Keenan Allen from the Chargers, giving the Bears their second superstar receiver in 12 months, changing the fortunes of the offense substantially going forward. Allen has been one of the most sure-handed and reliable targets in the sport for almost a decade, and while he might be approaching the later years of his career, his game isn't at all reliant on speed. Chicago also added running back DeAndre Swift in free agency, as well as bringing in veteran All-Pro safety Kevin Burrard and Jonathan Owens from Green Bay. Those two joined the collection of prime talent Poles brought into the defense the previous offseason, including Tremaine Edmonds' significant free agency deal and the sign-and trade of Montez Sweat during the 2023 season to add pressure off the edge. Poles was making sure that the rookie they drafted, looking more increasingly to be Caleb Williams, was set up for success. The previous regime had failed to do so for Justin Fields, and thrusting a rookie into an offense with a woeful offensive line and no standout weapons to throw to is a recipe for disaster. So by the time the 2024 NFL Draft was officially declared open, Poles had built an offense that boasted 2 impressive offensive tackles, great depth at the tight end position with the addition of Gerald Everett on top of Cole Kmet, and the services of both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, and yet he still wasn't done. And Chicago did in fact, as luck would have it, and fate would have it, Caleb Williams #1 overall, giving Chicago the best shot in their history of their franchise in finding a generational quarterback. For so long, the Bears fan base has desperately pleaded for a real difference maker at the position, and barring the odd season from the likes of Jay Cutler and Rex Grossman, they've been denied. Now they've acquired a player who receives almost every compliment imaginable for a young quarterback prospect. Caleb Williams is intelligent, charismatic, and possesses every tool you could hope for in a college standout. His ability to throw in the run and extend plays is reminiscent of Patrick Mahomes, with the arm talent, mobility, and X factor to become one of the future stars in the league. Williams flew to Detroit for the draft with wide receiver Rome Odunze out of Washington, a dominant one-on-one receiver who thrives in hauling the deep ball and overpowering defenses. Odunze was still on the board as Chicago came up at the second time for pick number 9, and Poles acted swiftly in completing the trio of wide receivers at Caleb Williams' disposal. That offense, in 2 seasons, has gone from one of the most underwhelming to one of the most impressive in the NFC. At this point, it looks like Ryan Poles is playing fantasy football with an offense including Caleb Williams, DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. But no, the fact that the offense he has built in real life for the Chicago Bears, NFC North has quickly become one of the most threatening divisions in football. The insane rise of the Detroit Lions is made for some must-watch TV, and Green Bay appears to have done a superb job in nurturing the talent of Jordan Love before unveiling him as their franchise quarterback. The Packers may have undergone significant changes in the past few years, but their talent pool doesn't even come close to matching Chicago's. Minnesota may have moved on from Kirk Cousins, but J.J. McCarthy will be a solid starter in the franchise. Any offense boasting Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson stands a chance. and the coaching for the Vikings is then poised to remain in contention in 2024. But no team's turnaround contends with that of the Chicago Bears, not even close. 2 seasons ago, the only NFL fans turning into Chicago Bears games were those praying that Justin Fields was going to run them out of trouble and somehow crack the curse associated with the quarterback position in the Windy City. That plan failed. But Ryan Poles has since executed the most magnificent rebuild, adding talent all over the field on both sides of the football. He spent the past 15 years of his career studying, learning, and developing his craft as a scout, spending time in one of the most successful franchises in recent years. Now, in 2024, his own life's work, his Sistine Chapel, will finally be unveiled in front of the world. Don't be mistaken, this is not the Chicago Bears team you've grown accustomed to mocking over the years. They're run like a winning program, they're built like a winning program, and as the 2024 NFL Draft approached, all they needed was a quarterback to steer the ship. The Bears got themselves a signal caller and one of the most impressive the college game has produced in a decade. Expect Chicago to win in 2024. Expect them to win a lot. And if you find them in the postseason threatening the NFC Championship game in 2024, you shouldn't even be slightly surprised. But it's the Bears.